A new documentary which is telling the story of David Bowie's life through unseen footage, performances and music.
Comes 15 years after the director, Brett Morgan, first approached the Starman singer about making a film. Although he was enthusiastic about the project, it was decided the timing wasn't quite right.
6 years after Bowie's death, the documentary has finally been brought to life. Take a look.
I'm delighted to say the director, Brett Morgan, is with us now. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We were just discussing outfits. Of course, David Bowie, famous for his outfits, and you've turned out nicely this morning.
Thank you so much. Well, It's morning. It's a Moonage Daydream, and this is sort of my homage to David and Life on Mars.
Well, this film is an extraordinary film, and what stands out from... There'll be plenty of things made about David Bowie, but these are his own words, aren't they? Do you want to just explain to people how you've come by so much material, how it's come about?
Yeah, well, it started in 2007. I had a meeting with David Bowie and his executor to discuss working on a hybrid nonfiction film. And at the time, David was in semi-retirement, so the timing didn't really work out.
Was that the first time you'd met him?
It was the first time I met him,
What was that like?
It wasn't intimidating. He was incredibly direct and present, and brilliant and intelligent, and and so we had this great meeting, and then 7 years later, when he passed, I reached out to the estate and told him that I was interested in doing a kind of non-traditional, non-fiction, immersive experience, not a biography, because there have been so many books and documentaries, including the brilliant 5-year series on the BBC about David. And I was like, what can I offer that hasn't been done? And it was the experience of Bowie. David is, I think, best, he's very hard to pin down. He's very hard to define. And in fact, I think it's kind of best to kind of just let him tell his story and experience it.
Actually, when you say he's very hard to pin down and very hard to define, you do tell the story of people just trying to figure out who Ziggy Stardust was, who David Bowie was, what his intention was when it came to his art and his creativity. And it just shows you can't pin it down. So it's almost like the way of telling this story, just there's the evidence, you make of it what you will, which in itself I think is quite... How did you not become personally involved in that? Because you would have gone through hours, hundreds and hours of archive footage. And you also had your own kind of experience, health experience, whilst making this.
Yeah, well, what happened was, in 2017, the estate granted me complete access to their entire archive. And the archive is immense. It took 2 years to screen through all of the materials. It had everything from all of the outtakes from Ziggy Stardust to the original full programs from the Russell Hardy shows, David's diaries, his journals, his paintings, every tour stuff fans have been hearing about for years, the Earl's Court show from '78 that was filmed on 35mm, just extraordinary materials. And I started going through all the material, and around the time I had a heart attack and flatlined and was in a coma for a week. And it wasn't an accident. My life had been kind of out of control. I'm workaholic. And when I entered this project, I knew I was going to discover a great creative mind, but I had never really explored David's interviews. And so here I am in a dark room for 2 years, alone with these images of David. And what really spoke to me was his kind of views and sort of philosophies on life. And I realized through him, he was kind of providing me with a kind of a roadmap on how to lead a more balanced and fulfilled life. I don't think there are many people, I've never read or seen or experienced anyone who I think has lived a more complete life than David, and that was by design, because David treated life like an adventure, and as soon as he mastered something, he would move on from it. We put so much value in our comfort and our security and in trying to maintain our status. And Bowie may be one of the only artists of his stature who was willing to risk it all for the pursuit of his creative, to fulfill a creative niche.
Do you know what fascinated me? Because I know from your experience, you reassessed your life and your relationship you have with your family, spending time with your kids and things like that. One of the things he said in the film that you put in the film was his reluctance to fall in love. His reluctance, pre-Iman, his reluctance to commit to someone else because he felt that would take away his creativity.
He met Iman, it really felt to me from and through his words that he had found a sort of this comfort, this place that had been eluding him. And I think from that vantage point, he was able to produce some of his greatest work after he met Iman, beginning with Outside and carrying all the way through to Black Star.
He's one of those people, isn't it? And I think there are probably a handful of them where, if you ever met him, I didn't, interviewed a lot of people, never him. He's one of those people you'd say, do you know, I once met David Bowie.
Yes.
And everyone would go, really, what was it? He's one of those people, isn't he? He has an absolute fascination. Maybe even if you didn't particularly like the music, because he had so much about him. He had a real pull, didn't he?
David had an endless curiosity. And as I mentioned earlier, he was always present. One of the people asked me what was the greatest discovery that I found in the vault. And as people have seen the movie, there's the Gene Genie, Love Me Do with Jeff Beck, which is mind-blowing, and Heroes at Earl's Court, and all that stuff's mind-blowing. But my favorite piece of media I discovered was a pre-roll and an interview with an MTV VJ in, I think, 86 or 87. And this particular journalist knew nothing about David. This was at a point when he was very mainstream. And as they sat down, I kind of was cringing and going, oh God, this is not gonna go good. And they sat down and they started, before the camera started rolling, David wanted to talk to her about what books she'd been reading. He wanted to share what he had been reading. And I realized that he viewed every opportunity, every moment as an opportunity for an exchange. And this is a man who loved life in a way, at such a deep passion. The first day I was on the job, Tony Visconti, David's longtime producer, invited me into his studio to listen to some stems. It was quite emotional. It was, I think, only 2 years since David had passed, and Tony said, this is where David recorded the Black Star, and he said, I want to play you something. And he put on a song called Signet Committee that was recorded, I believe, in like '69. And in it, at the crescendo of the song, David sings, I want to live, I want to live, I want to live. And Tony isolated the vocals. And you could hear David sobbing uncontrollably as he was singing the song. And here's a man at the very beginning of his life who had such an appreciation for the brevity of our time on Earth that it almost sounded like the sounds of someone who, the last moment they're on Earth, not at the very beginning of their journey.
Well, do you know what? We both had the opportunity to see the film, and I think in itself is a real work of art. I think
it is.
And I know you're trying to reflect him, but I think it is. It's a wonderful piece in itself, and it's a great film to see. Lovely meeting you this morning.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Really
so
good
much.
to meet you. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Brett Morgan. Brett's film Moonage Daydream will be in UK cinemas from September the 23rd.